Welcome to episode number 6, how to outsource your social media without risking quality or brand reputation. If you're an online course creator, agency owner, or coach who feels overwhelmed by the amount of time you're spending on creating and editing social media posts, and yet you're still worried about outsourcing because you're afraid it will reduce the quality of work, then that's okay. We can fix that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. In this episode, you'll discover 6 simple steps to get your team to do your most soul-crushing tasks for you. And if you're thinking, this cannot be delegated, I need to do this, I'm going to offer you, take a little humility pill here, right? Have you ever seen a viral video that you haven't edited, like someone else's? So surely there are content that can be done by other people. And if you think this is too complicated to be delegated, it needs to be done by you because it's your face, it's your brand, it's your style. It never gets to your quality. When every time somebody edits it for you, it's just not really on point. Then I want to ask you, is there anyone else that have succeeded on social media creating a brand? Is there anyone you're following who's doing a great job at their content? I mean, you didn't edit their videos, right? And they were successful. So surely there are other people out there who could do the job for you. I don't mean to be a piece of crap here, but I think you get the point. There are usually more things that we can outsource if we do it correctly than we initially think. And if you think it's too risky to delegate this because of, you don't want to wreck your brand or your reputation or stuff like that, then think about it this way. We delegate all kinds of things in our world. We delegate childcare. We delegate taking us to different locations in a thing that is flying in the sky. We don't do that by ourselves. We have someone else take us there. It would be even more dangerous for us to fly the airplane. At least if I did it. You should be afraid if you're looking to me to fly your airplane. So the idea here is that there are a bunch of things that should be delegated that we're not delegating because we think we have to do it. So going into this episode, I want you to open up your mind a little bit to the possibilities of someone else doing the things that you think you should be doing or the things that nobody possibly could do. So the reasons I believe, and this is something I see fairly often, is that the reason why you're having to do all social media, it is probably because you don't have a system in place which clearly guides your VA or your team through the social media creation process. At best, you probably have some screen recordings or, in some unsorted Google Drive with maybe some Google Docs trying to explain a little bit what it is that you want. So the thing that happens here is that they don't know what is expected and how this should be done with enough definition. Without this structured workflow, you will end up doing everything yourself because they can't work up to your standard. They can't give you what it is that you want because you're lacking to give them what they need to give you what you want. I hope that makes sense. I just rambled through that one. This also will impact your levels of trust with your team because it becomes this weird loop where you give them a task, they fail at it, so you don't want to give them a new task, and then you realize, this can't be delegated, I have to do it myself. And then you end up in a situation where you don't create the structures, you don't create the trainings, and there is therefore no chance for anyone else to take over those tasks for you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how you can structure your way of doing things so that other people can do it for you. A few examples of this that you might have happen in your business is that, for example, when you ask your VA or your team to extract clips from podcasts, like what I'm doing here today, they will give you a clip that is half of the story. It becomes almost a cliffhanger. You want to create a reel, but it's just half of it. They don't kind of get the concept of what it is that you're trying to say. So that piece of reel is just basically worthless. Another result you might have if your workflows aren't really up to standard is that you probably get typos in captions. The language they're using isn't really the way you would speak. It just doesn't really resemble the way or who you are. And when we're talking about graphics and the things that they create, it's not up to your standard. It's off to the center a little bit. It just looks bad. There's something off with the task. So that just leaves you to do it yourself. Think about it this way. Let's say you're going to a restaurant, you're going to order some food, and the waiter comes up to you and you say I would like some green stuff, maybe some red stuff. I want it to be a little bit hot, not too hot, semi-hot. I want it to be the way I like it. And I want the meat should be dead. It'd be impossible for them to make you what it is that you want. So that's kind of how some of us lead our teams. Just like, I'm just going to describe it a little bit fluffy, a little bit like, my feelings, my emotions, and then probably someone's going to figure out what the heck that means. And then they come back with something that is a little bit green. It is a bit, semi-hot, and the meat is dead. And then you're like, that's not actually what I wanted. I wanted a pizza. So a better way to order something is to look at the menu and say, hey, I would like a pepperoni pizza. Or another way of saying it is, hey, I would like you to initiate process number 3. So the thing you've done now is that you've pressed the button of initiate process. You didn't create like a fluffy thing that nobody really understands. No, you said, hey, initiate process number 3, pepperoni pizza. And that creates like a series of events that ends up with a pepperoni pizza on your plate. From the moment in time when the waitress presses the thing on her little hand computer, that's probably not what they call it, but that's what I call it. It sends a message to the kitchen. They know what to do, and they initiate their process of like, okay, pepperoni. Probably should have pepperoni on it. It's going to be a pizza, so they initiate the pizza process, And step by step, it's checked and performed at the level of the manager or the owner so that you will get a pepperoni pizza that tastes good every single time. That's kind of how I want your social media creation to be. Every time you press start, your team should know how exactly to do it, step by step, with an understanding of like, okay, we don't have pepperoni for our pizza. What do we do instead? So they should understand the bigger picture of it. So my question to you now is, do you run your social media creation as in, I want some green, some blue, some yellow stuff? Or do you run them as in, initiate process number 3, pepperoni pizza? The first way of doing this is something that I call the Bottleneck Entrepreneur. It's the people who are like very visionary. I want a little bit of this, sense of this, think about my feelings and try to produce what it is that I want, read my mind type of stuff. And they end up being like the bottleneck because they don't have the ability to communicate what it is that they want in a way that people understand, relates to, and creates engagement. And which means they have to do everything themselves. So if this relates to you, and if you could feel like, oh, you know what, that's probably how things are being ordered inside of my business, then the next part here I think you'll find very valuable. So if this is the way you run your business, I want to offer you a new and what I would say is way better approach to doing this. So the new way is to create a workflow or an SOP that includes a very clear starting point and end point. When you order the pepperoni pizza, that's your start point. And the end point is when the pepperoni pizza is delivered to the customer. In your case, it would be the situation when you press stop on your button, which I'm going to do in a moment. And the end point would be when the Reels or podcast is published on your platform. And a really strong workflow, a really strong social media workflow that will produce the results that you want consistently without you having to be everywhere needs a few things. It needs a clear starting point. It needs a clear endpoint. It needs a purpose, end state, and rules. And we're going to talk all about those things. And don't worry, it might sound confusing or complicated, but it's not. And if you want to dive deeper into the purpose, end state, and rules, which are the necessities of delegating tasks, then there are previous episodes I think you should check out, which will give you everything you need, including a fill-in-the-blank template to communicate tasks to your team so they can work autonomously and without you having to redo it as much as you might be doing right now. Okay. When you nail this, you'll finally have the time to focus on the things that only you can do. Being on camera, like me right now. Plus, you'll have a really easy way to replace team members in case they get sick or they have to do something else. And also a really cool part is that you don't have to be afraid of VAs ghosting you again, because having this workflow will make it so simple for you to onboard new people, because you will have all the resources, the training, the visualizations, everything for them to get started. And I think the best part, you will never get stuck trying to edit an Instagram reel for 50 minutes, an hour just to get the freaking audio and everything the way you want it, because people will be able to do that for you. And most importantly, at least for me, it is that you'll be able to build a team that knows your style and that autonomously can create content in your spirit, as I like to call it. This means that you will only need to do a few things, such as approve it or decline it. A good example of this was when I traveled Europe a few years ago. I went from Sweden to Spain in my van, and I built a system of creating blog posts that turned into ad revenue, making me able to travel Europe. And all I had to do was create the content ideas. And then my starting point was the point when I said, hey, this is ready to be created. And then I had 2 review points along the line of that. which means that all I had to do was every Wednesday, I would go in and I would go through what they've created. I would comment and then send it up to stage number 2, which would be the creation of the graphics. And once the graphics came back, I went to look at them and say, hey, this looks great. And then the process moved on. So I created the ideation, I did the reviews, and then I checked the final things and published it. That's basically all I did. And they could speak in my voice. They could create content that I was really proud of, and that I was something that I could really stand behind and feel like, wow, yeah, this is good stuff. That's what I want for you. It's the same if you want to create reels. It's the same if you want to do a podcast. Like the things you're watching right now and the reels attached to this will not have been created by me. It will have been created by my team. And if you feel like, I don't know if I can trust my VAs, and then there's a previous episode, I think it's episode 4 or something, like how do you delegate when the trust isn't there? That's really important for you guys who feel like, I don't know if I can trust my team. And that episode will teach you how to not trust them, but actually just create tasks that are risk-free, so you don't have to trust people. That's a really valuable one. This is also huge because if you nail this, or I should say when you nail this, because it's just a matter of time, you will make one of the biggest leaps in your business journey, as far as I believe. And that would be going from an employee of your own business to the CEO and the leader. And that's a huge step because suddenly you will do the things that are the most important. You will have time, which you could do whatever you want with, either develop the business or go with your family, hang out with your friends, whatever. But you will move from being the employee to being the leader. That's why I started this entire channel. That's why it's called the CEO School. And that's why this is such a core piece of content to get people out of that endless rut of just producing to developing, making things better. And this is the part that gets me really excited. The leadership aspect of this is just amazing because I get to take all the beautiful things that I learned from the military, which is a lot of hard sweat, blood, and tears, and I get to give them to you. And you can implement them in your business without crawling in the mud or going on international deployments and risking your life. You could just take all this beautiful stuff and implement it in your business and make it grow and make it into whatever it is that you want it to become. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabriel von Knorring. Yes, a complicated name even for Swedish people to pronounce. I've done 12 years in the army, the last few years as an EOD operator, which is the people who go and pick up bombs out of the ground. You know, when there's explosive things in the wrong place, me and my team, we go there and pick them up the ground. So I had to really learn how to communicate tasks and make my team work incredibly autonomous, because once I go and approach a bomb, my team is behind me taking care of medical, taking care of logistics, everything. And I cannot even communicate with them. So I've become an expert in trying to figure out how to communicate tasks so that people care, take ownership, and can solve them autonomously. And that's what all of this is about. And now I'm implementing it in my business, which allowed me to, as I told before, go on amazing journeys and travel the world, relying solely on the income from my websites. And now I'm doing this stuff. I get to share all this with you, which I'm super excited about. Okay, so how the heck do you do this? Yes, it's the 6 steps process that I use to create workflows for my clients, which means their most horrible time-wasting task can be transferred to someone else, someone who wants to do them because that's what they enjoy in life. You did this because you probably want to be an entrepreneur, build some cool things, but other people out there just want a freaking task that they can solve and be proud of. So we're going to take all the things that you find boring and we're going to turn into things that people can understand and perform and excel at. So everyone gets to do what they're best at. These are the 6 steps to create your amazing workflow so you can delegate even the most complex task. Number 1, you want to define a start and end point. Number 2, you want to define a purpose, end state, and rules. 3, you want to create a visual flowchart. And 4, you want to assess and implement the workflow into your project management software. And 5, train your team how to use it. This is important. And 6, you want to evaluate performance regularly and make improvements. So let's dive into each single step so that you have a clear understanding on what it is that you need. Step number 1 is to produce a start and an end point to your workflow. This is basically the handover takeover. When are you going to leave it to your team and when are you going to return it back to you? If in the case of a YouTube podcast post-production or whatever social media, for me, it's when I press the stop button and I upload it to a Google Drive. That is giving the team the signal, okay, here's something that popped up, and this is automatically in our project management system. So when I upload it in there, it pings them and they know like, okay, this one's ready to act on. Then you got to define a endpoint. When does it stop? When are they done with the task? This is super important because otherwise you might have this process or system that just like never gets finished. In my case, the endpoint is the video is published on YouTube and Hello Audio and the reels have been scheduled. Step number 2 is to identify the purpose, end state, and rules. This is something that if you want to dive deeper into, I have a fill in the blank template and I have some extra training because this is the essentials of delegating. You need to communicate these 3 things every time you give a task to someone. I know you want to skip it. I know you want to send like a Slack message saying, hey, could you do this for me? But you could be pretty sure that they're going to not understand it exactly the way you want it. So I really want you to use the purpose, end state, rules template if you want consistent results and you want people to reach your expectations over and over and over again. When it comes to purpose, you got to ask yourself, why is this workflow necessary? What obstacle will it solve? Is it to take time off of your plate? Is it to create high quality content? What is it? Why does this need to exist? A very common thing with the people I talk to and the clients that I have is that it is, I want to get things off my plate and I want to have consistent brand quality. Those are the 2 major things that when we do social media workflows that they want. Next thing you got to think about is the end state. A really good question to ask yourself is, what would a dream outcome look like? One very common is that they want to be consistent on social media. They want to have high quality graphics and engaging captions. Something like that. So now your team knows by the end of this process, this is what should have happened. We are posting regularly, it's high quality, and it's engaging captions. Another way to articulate this is to say, when the task is complete, when the process is complete, you will have created 1 YouTube video, 5 reels, and they have been scheduled on Metricool. Something like that. That would be the end state. Now people know that, okay, when this process is finished, this will have been completed. So if that has not been done, the process isn't completed. They kind of move on, So a clear end state is very important. Now, the next thing is the rules. The rules are what things that cannot happen and what must happen. Here's where you want to talk about certain formats they have to follow. Do you have templates for them? Do you have things that the rules or policies that we must adhere to? And these are like the hard lines, a line in the sand. If they cross it, they've failed at their task. So this should be really specific, it should be measurable, and it should be something that everybody can agree on, that you can objectively look at and say, no, this has not happened. Such as a template. If they have to use a template and they're not using it, then they haven't solved the task. This is step number 2, purpose, end state, rules. If you think that this is complicated and it's like, I can't remember all this, don't worry about it. There is a fill in the blank template you can use, and which I train my people how to use. And I think you should actually use it because it's very valuable. You can find it at sankosleadership.com/podcast, and you'll get access to all our free tools, all our amazing things. Step number 3, and I think this is where a lot of people take shortcuts and where they skip it because it takes a little bit of time, but it's so valuable because it works on the most effective way of getting people to understand something, showing them. So step number 3 is to create a visual flowchart. In the flowchart, you want to show people who does what and when. This is where you mark out the start point, the end point, and everything in between. When it comes to content production, I use a simple 4P process. And once again, you can find it on the website. It's going to look kind of similar to most of you guys. Maybe you rename it or maybe you use different words for it, but it's probably going to look something like this. You're going to have phase 1, preparation. Then you're going to have production. Then you're going to have a publish, and then performance. So basically you have the preparations where you create the ideas and you set everything up. Then we have the production where you actually create the content, and then you publish it, and then you check the analytics and you make sure that the performance is good, and then you have this loop going on, right? The things you need in your flowchart to make this very visual to people is that you have to structure out who does what and when are you going to review, and what are you going to review. The reviews are super important because that means that they're going to be triggers for your team to kind of understand, okay, I've done this part now, it's time to send it off for review, and that pings you only when it's necessary, and you check only what is necessary right now to move on. This means you won't have to micromanage because you know they will check in on you in the right time. And if you want to learn more about check-ins, because it's a really powerful thing, there's also an earlier episode on that, where you make check-ins in a way where they want you present, and it makes it efficient. In this visual flowchart, I also like to add all the links to instructions, into videos, into whatever it is that they need to perform this task. So it's very simple to them, and they could follow this flowchart through to make sure that, okay, I'm here now. That means that I gotta check in with the boss lady or the boss man and send him like a ping. This flowchart is also the exact same thing that should be inside of your project management system. So whatever you name something here should be named the same in your project management system so that people kind of relate and understand what's happening. People now can clearly see it. This is like the map of how you're running your business. It's like trying to find a treasure without the map, and someone's going to describe you. You know, you have that friend who's like, you know, when you ask them where they're at and they send you a text of like, oh, it's a red house with tall trees. And you're like, oh God, I'm never going to find you this way. And then they send you a picture of it. And like, okay, that's better, but still I have no idea what it's at. And then maybe if they're really good at it, they will send you a pinpoint, and then Google Maps show you exactly where you need to go. It's basically a flow chart. Take right here, go straight, go this way. That's what you want for your team. You want to give them a GPS and a flow chart or a GPS route to where they want to go. You don't just want to send them a long text of what they should do. I hope that makes sense. That's an important one. Now that you've created a workflow, you can see how things are working, or if you just copied mine, which is going to work for you because we all are doing the same thing. So there's really no need to reinvent the wheel unless you really like to make wheels, I guess. And I guess you could do that. Now it's time to assess and implement this workflow into our project management system. Maybe you use Asana, ClickUp, whatever you do. I use Google Sheets because I've used all the others and I like it simple. But whatever it is, now you take all that visualization and you add it into your spreadsheet or your Asana to make sure that people can clearly see the different phases and they can clearly see when they need to contact you. This really depends on what system you're using. So you got to kind of adapt and improvise and survive. I think the great warrior philosopher Beyonce once said, no, she never said that. I think it's Bear Grylls, to be honest. Whatever. You guys who got the reference, you got it. Okay, after the implementation into our project management software, which I'm so tired of saying right now, it's time to train your team how to do it. Because now you have the visuals, you have all the instructions, you have the videos, you've collected all of that, and you've structured it in a way where people can make sense out of it. This is a big deal. You've done all the hard work now, or you've hired me to do it for you. That is up to you, but I'm going to teach you how to do it if you really want to do it yourself. Once again, reinventing the wheel. Then it's time to train your team how to use this. This is the wheels of your car in some sense, right? You have built the engine, you've built the chassis, you have all these amazing things, but now you're going to attach the wheels so it actually can go somewhere. And that is training your team. And the better you train your team, the more smooth this will work. You know, if you have squared wheels, it's going to be a horrible, horrible thing. But if you have round and big ones, you can go kind of anywhere you want. That's also a pretty crappy metaphor, but I'll try to improve on that one to the next one. When you train your team, I think it's really important that you do this with a little bit of a structured approach. You just don't want to make a screen recording that it's 90 minutes long where you just blab through all of this. Like, give it some effort, because if you give this some effort and you make it into like a solid class and you make it into some solid training, you will be able to reuse this until forever. Because this is where you get the opportunity to stop being afraid of VAs ghosting you, or people leaving you, or someone getting sick and everything just halting. Because if you figure out the training part and you have your visualizations, you have all that in place, that means that VA you're depending on right now can be exchanged fast. And this is important because that means you can relax now. You know that you don't have to have a unicorn VA. You can just have an average one because you have all the training necessary to make them work in your spirit and in the way you want it to be. This is big stuff. Like, yes, if you can figure this out, it is great. I really would love for you to figure this part out. People spend way too little time training their teams, thinking that you could just give someone a task, give someone a picture of that house, and they will find their way to the end result. But they won't. And you already know that, because otherwise you probably wouldn't be listening to this stuff. So training your team how to use the workflow is essential. Once you've trained your team and you've learned a little bit of lessons from that, it's time to evaluate the performance and make improvements to your SOPs. So your first round of this doesn't have to be amazing. It shouldn't even be amazing. It probably should be pretty crappy. Like, your first draft is pretty crappy. And we want it to be pretty crappy. Because now that your team is doing this, you're using your workflow, you're going to learn stuff. They're going to learn stuff. And then you're going to implement lessons learned into your workflow, into your instructions, into your videos, so that it becomes better and better and better. That means as they learn, the next person on board will have a way easier time to do this. And everything that gets screwed up, you just put that in the SOP. You put that in the workflow. And you're like, you know what? I should probably have another trigger here, a review trigger, because this is usually where we screw up. This is where things go bad. You add that in there, and then off you go. And then you do that for a couple of times, because I don't know how many posts you're doing per week. You have a bunch of opportunities to improve this and make it better. And if you think this is a lot when you can't really find the time to do this, I totally get it. You basically have two options here. You could go to sankosleadership.com/podcast, join our community, and you will find all the training in more detail on how to do that. And the other way is just hire me to do it for you. Okay, the thing we've done today is we've gone through the 6 simple steps to get your team to do your most soul-crushing tasks for you, so that you can focus on the 5% that will move your business forward, and so you don't ever have to get stuck in a freaking IG reel for 50 minutes that by the end of it, it's still average. Have someone else spend the time on it, and have you doing the most important things, such as ideation, and make your business amazing, and break through that freaking 6-figure plateau once and for all, and skyrocket. Okay, I'll see you next time. Ciao.